Hello, everybody. Welcome out to the Dice Tower. My name's Chris Yee.
And I'm Mike Delisio.
Today we're taking a look at This is Ichor from Bitewing Games, designed by Reiner Knizia. This is one of the first two games they have in their Mythos series, a two-player series of games, which I was excited for. Mike, I have to imagine you were excited for a few reasons, too.
Absolutely, yeah. First of all, the publisher has done some really great production so far. They've worked with Reiner Knizia before, so two-player exclusive games, I'm excited about that for sure.
Yep, and so very cool cover art here by Tyler Miles Lockett. I also want to mention that. So let's cut to how this game plays, and then we'll go ahead and give you our thoughts. Here's Ichor set up on the table. One player will be playing the role of the monsters here invading Olympus, and the other will be playing the gods of Olympus. In this game, you will move one of your pieces in a straight line as far as you may choose to go, and you'll drop off one of your pieces into each of the spaces that it left from and moved through. If over the course of the game you're able to move past somebody else's pieces, you will remove them and return them back to the supply, putting out your own pieces into each of those slots, once again, that you moved through and that you started from. The goal of the game being the first player to drop all of your pieces of influence out onto the board. A quick note that I will say right now is that these are the deluxe components, and in full honesty, we have some of the regular components, but not all of them, because the deluxe ones are what's in the library, and we lost some of these while in the move here. So this is an example of the deluxe, the upgraded. You don't have to get the acrylic standees. The game comes with cardboard standees, and in lieu of these nice resin pieces, it comes with screen-printed wooden disc versions of each of these. So I wanted to just address the component differences, and you can see those right there. Now, continuing along with the overview, as I mentioned, the goal is to be the first person to put out all of your pieces onto the board, at which point you will win the game. If I had just placed out the last of the blue pieces right now, the score for the monster player would be the number of unplaced pieces from the Greek gods. At this point, the players would reset the board back to starting, back to all the positions, put all the discs back in the supply. The players would then switch sides with the same setup here, and then they would play again, and if the other player is able to win that round, they compare score by however many leftover tokens are left there, and the player with the most points off of the two matches will be the winner of the game. Now, that's a very quick little idea about moving back and forth and placing out your discs. There is one other wrinkle in that each of the player's movers, the pieces here, are going to correspond to one of these cards. So the Cyclops here, for example, could take a turn by doing, instead of just the normal move, by using their special move over here. So every card can be activated for its power instead of taking a normal turn. So if I wanted to do the Cyclops' action, you see here the card reads, I may, after moving, move a second time as normal, and then I remove this figure from the board. So if I wanted to move this way to drop this off, and then I wanted to come down here to drop a little bit more influence, I could do that, flip this card face over to show it's spent, and remove this figure from the board. Now, not all of them require you to remove your figure. If this player had put a lot of the pressure on by putting these pieces over here, I could use the Griffin's power. When moving, you may jump over one figure. So by spending this, I can move straight to the end here, jumping over Apollo, returning these, and placing out discs where I came from and where I moved through. There are also powers for all of the Greek gods over here. So for example, Artemis says it ends its movement on a space with a monster and then remove both figures from the game. So if you are in a position where you really need to do that. Or Hermes here, instead of moving as normal, jump to a space that is without a figure. So Hermes could move somewhere to block someone. He only puts out one disc where he started from, but maybe he has to stop this player from making a big move or coming over this way, destroying this disc, and preventing some other big move. The other thing I'd like to point out is that there are player aids here. So the monster player is going to get a player aid showing all of the Greek god abilities, and likewise the opposite here for the other players. I also wanted to show a quick second shot here of all of the monster and all of the god powers so that you can see them all in one nice shot there, as well as show off the backside of the cloth mat here, which instead of having a 6x6 grid has a 7x7 grid, an optional variant you can play with more monsters and powers on each side, as well as each player having 5 more of their tokens that they have to place out onto the board in order to win. It's kind of an advanced variant, and you can see a quick shot of all the powers if you wanted to look at what they do. So I think one of the first things for me, I love two-player game series. I've loved a lot of the stuff from the Lookout Spiel one, the classic one from Cosmos, and this is kind of starting a two-player series of games. This, along with Iliad, were kickstarted together. And I'll say, for one thing, leaning into the production, leaning into the it's not a super thematic game. It's actually quite abstract. But I would say that they definitely took advantage of the theming, and they took advantage of some really amazing art here. In fact, the artist has his own series of Greek mythology art that he's doing, a little advertisement in there for that. And I got to say, what a great fit for the way that this game looks.
Absolutely, and as you said, it's an abstract game, but when you're doing a head-to-head game, it makes sense to go with a mythological theme where you've got the gods on one side, the monsters on the other. It makes sense, and the art is fantastic. The production is stellar. It really kind of at least gives you some beautiful window dressing to a head-to-head battle.
And some of the characters are going to feel nicely thematic, right? And if you're going to have what is it? You have 6 per team. You have, I think, 8 per side that you can choose from, teams of 6 at a time. If they're thematic characters, it's going to create less of that feeling of overhead, because that is kind of one of the first things you're presented. You see a chess or checkers-like board, and you're like, okay, cool. The idea of moving and dropping the little pieces, very simple, right? Feels very clean and abstract. But then you introduce these powers based on each one of the characters, and it has that potential to feel kind of overwhelming. And I'm curious what your reaction was that to Mike. Was your overall takeaway different from your first reaction, or how did you feel about it?
Yeah, there's certainly going to be some overhead in your first couple of games, because not only are you concentrating on the powers that you have, the 6 of the 8 that you happen to be starting with, you should know those relatively well, but you also have 2 cards that tell you what your opponent's powers are too. And so from a production standpoint, I think that that's very smart. Make it so that you know not only what you can do, but what your what your opponent can do. But that is 12 different powers that you have to kind of internalize to a great extent. Now, on the pieces themselves, on the standees, so to speak, there are some icons that give you a little bit of a visual guide. I think some of them are clearer than others. I don't think any of them are bad, but I think some of them are much easier to look at visual and be like, oh, that's right, that's the piece that can do that. But I do think that the game is short enough. Actually, they recommend when you play it to play as both sides, to play as the gods once and then as the monsters once. And so I think you start to internalize what the powers can be relatively quickly, but there is a little bit of a learning curve for that.
Yeah, and what I was surprised by is that it felt like it was going to be a lot up front, and then a few turns in, I was like, okay, well, I remember that your piece can do this, and a lot of times I had to remember that I could even do stuff on my own, right? They're one-time use powers, and so you have that feeling of wanting to hold off on them until a really opportune time, and you realize, I got to just use some of these. And once you do that, it flips over and it takes out one piece of the overhead of the game. So I found that the game actually was not as upfront heavy as I was afraid it was going to be. And by the time that I switched sides with the other with the other player, I played monsters first, and then you switch and you play the gods. And since the recommendation is to do that and you keep the same setup, you already know what all the tricks and all the little hoots and the hollers and the little fireworks are that you can pull off. And you're like, okay, well, I did this to you. I'm not going to let you pull that off on me. And just playing that recommended way made it for me a lot easier to remember what the powers were. And so by the time I played again, even switching out some of the powers, I had a good amount of them still in my head. I was actually surprised by that.
Yeah, no, I do agree with that because, again, the powers are generally pretty easy to understand, right? There's none of these powers are necessarily complex. They usually will maybe break movement rules, things along those lines, because the standard movement is move as far as you want or as you can because you get blocked by the other players in a vertical or horizontal direction. And while you're doing so, you're dropping those markers, and winning condition is getting rid of all the markers on your side. So it's mostly changing that up. There are some other things you can do, like push other players, things along those lines. But by the end of that first full game, you have a pretty good feel on how things work. I'll tell you, Chris, the very first time that I played most recently, I started as the monsters, and the gods players didn't trigger their powers once, and I lost. So it is possible to lose this game, to lose this game with the other players taking just standard turns. Now, it could be that I'm terrible. That's always a valid possibility. But I think that it was more just a reaction to what I was doing when I was doing it. They were not necessarily compelled to use their powers. But what was especially frustrating is that I really wanted them to use a power so that I can bust the Medusa on them and do the same power back. Never had the opportunity in that game. But yeah, it's something that is a first game or two issue. And honestly, in that first game or two, powers or not, you're just kind of figuring out kind of what the game is about, the pacing of the game, kind of the ebb and flow of the tokens that you're going to be putting out and then having to take back. So it's not a huge issue. It seems like a lot in your first play, but the beauty of the game is that it really is, it's one that's going to internalize pretty quickly.
And I think that you make a great point that it's a solid abstract game even without the powers. And those powers, whether you choose to use them or not, can just add little wrinkles to it. And likewise, I have also lost against someone who did not use their power, like a single power, and then I trade sides, and I was like, okay, I'm going to use these because I don't think I'm that good. And I got to say, the other thing I do love about it is I'm very picky with my abstract games, Mike. I really like that this one has a specific scoring condition that makes a lot of sense. However many discs your opponent has left, if you go out, is your points for the round. Play 2 rounds, and whoever got more points. So what I think that does for me as someone who I'm not wild about chess. I'm not wild about a lot of just like straight up win-loss abstracts. I like ones that make me feel like I've accomplished a bit. So even if I know I'm about to lose a round, but I can do some sort of move that minimizes the damage. I'm going to try to put as many of my tokens out so my opponent only scores 3 points despite winning instead of 9 points by me having 9 of my discs left over on my side. That's great, and that gives me something to do even as I feel like I'm losing.
No, I agree. The scoring is very smart, extremely intuitive. Like if you didn't know what the scoring was, you could almost guess. So it's like, oh, so I get points for the amount of these that are left over. It makes sense. And so I agree with you. A lot of times in abstract games, it's a kind of a zero-sum thing. And the fact that you get to play both sides, have the opportunity to score points as each side, I think does work very well. And simple, makes sense. And the game is fast. Okay, I think even if you're a pretty deliberate player, the game is designed to not last terribly long. It's designed, I think, so that you play both sides, right? So if you're very, very deliberate in your thinking, really trying to kind of puzzle every move out, I think the maximum you're talking about to play both games is probably 45 minutes. That may even be what it says on the box. I don't remember.
Yeah, 40 minutes what it says on the box, and that is playing both sides. And I've also played this plenty where in my household of 3, Wendy, myself, and a 9-year-old daughter, we just did a little like round-robin tournament style. Whoever got knocked out, the other person came in. And so it's fun that it logically works that way, but I think that the best way to play this is the recommended play both sides. Shall we move on to final thoughts and scores, Mike?
I think that'd be great.
All right. I'll start. I'm very surprised how much I like this game. As I said, I'm picky with my abstract. There's plenty that I like a lot. But I also like a lot of what, obviously, it's designer Knizia and when he works with Bitewing games. And this is the one I was less excited of the two between the start of the Mythos pack, Iliad and Ichor. But I'm giving this one an 8.5 because I've played it a lot of times now, and it keeps being pleasant to get back to the table. It keeps being really fun. Like I said, even when I'm losing, giving me just like a little bit more to do. And then, okay, now we're going to swap sides. And now the pressure's on. I have to score more than 3 points. And I love that. I think that the core of the game, just the moving and dropping the discs, is a very fun and very clever. Throw in those powers, throw in the two round and scoring nature of the game and everything. Throw in the fact that there is an expansion, not even including that expansion and with more characters and stuff. There's a good amount of playability in this box because of the way that things are set up. Oh, I prefer the Minotaur when he's over on the side. What do I do when he's the character in the middle? All of that factors into what I think is a very good, very playable, and quick to get to the table game. I like it a lot.
I'm close, Chris. I'm very close to that. I settled at an 8, and that could improve with continued plays. I mean, it certainly could. There's really not a lot of negatives other than it has to exist within a space of other two-player abstract games, even by this designer, right? And I think it's in the higher tier. I mean, I'm giving it an 8. It's a very, very strong score. But there's just a little bit of familiarity, I guess I would say, in the structure of the moving and the dropping of pieces. I mean, that's something that you have seen in other abstract games, right? I do think that the twists to this game are substantial, and they're really good, hence the 8, but it didn't quite give it that excellence spot just because the core loop was a little bit familiar to me, maybe not as innovative as some other two-player abstracts that I've played, but man, I'm nitpicking here. It's a fantastic game that I heartily recommend to any fans of especially two-player abstract games. Beautiful production, beautiful art. Really, really, really solid package.
All right, well, there you go. I agree with you, Mike, and I like this one just a little bit more than you. That's all right, because high of an 8.5 is going to give Ichor a seal of excellence from us here at the Dice Tower. Thanks for coming out to this review. Make sure to also check out soon the review of Iliad, if that's not up already, the other companion game from this Kickstarter here. So until next time, folks, my name's Chris Yee.
I'm Mike Delisio.
And have fun dropping a Medusa on them.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching this video. If you like this review or whatever you just watched, wasn't it amazing? Check out our channel, Dice Tower. We have all kinds of things. We review games, we do top 10s, we play games live. It's all about board games, but especially the people who play them. Check out Dice Tower YouTube channel.